Welcome to Primetime Conversations. Here's your host, James Tunstall.
Hey everyone, welcome to the show. Thanks for joining us. Today, very special guest, one of very few TNA or / Impact Wrestling Triple Crown champions. You'll be seeing him at Rebellion. Hopefully, he'll be reclaiming his Impact World title against Moose, the one and only Mr. Josh Alexander. Josh, how you doing today?
I'm doing well, thank you. Yeah, looking forward to April 23rd, man.
Big match. Obviously, you've been thinking about this match for the past 6 months after Moose cashed in on you. What's going through your head for this big match coming up?
I mean, like you said, I've had 6 months to think about all this stuff. And, you know, if it was just left at him cashing in and taking the championship at Rebellion or at Bound for Glory, I think, you know, I would be all right with that, understanding of that. But, you know, lately in the past, you know, month or two, Moose has only compounded my frustrations and anger and all this other stuff by, you know, taking it to a different level and, you know, getting my family involved and stuff like that. So, you know, I have plenty of frustration and plenty of motivation to take out on him on April 23rd.
Oh yeah, and at least this time, you know where you stand now. It's not like you've just gone through a hard-fought match against Christian for the title and he's cashed in. Now you're fully prepared for what's ahead of you.
Yeah.
Good. So before we get back into Rebellion, then I was going through your CV, I suppose you could say, and your work on the Indies. You wrestle a lot on the Indies and a lot of big names on there. What was it like working in the Indies back in these mid 2000s to early 10s and the grind, I suppose you could say?
Oh, it never felt like a grind, really.
No?
Like I just felt fortunate to be able to get the opportunities and get the matches and work for the promotions and work with the people I got to work with because. Like I said it many times in interviews before, when I started wrestling, I had no intention of being a wrestler. I never thought it was possible. I looked at, you know, people like my heroes and I'd be like, I could never be like that. So everything was just like a goal upon a goal upon a goal. And then eventually I started setting bigger and bigger goals as I accomplished the smaller ones. And it got to the point where it was like, I got to get on the road. I got to travel. And, you know, through whatever luck, talent, whatever, I kept getting these opportunities in these big matches, big indie names with these big promotions. And I was just, you know, happy and felt fortunate. And I still do for everything I get to do in wrestling. So.
Yeah. Who were some of your heroes growing up? I imagine as a Canadian, Bret Hart's top of the list.
Yeah. Well, Bret's really up there. Like the funny part is when I started getting into wrestling, Bret Hart had left WWF, and I got into it over Stone Cold Steve Austin and his rise to the World Championship and all that. So it started with him, and then you know I discovered renting videotape, which is a thing for the kids won't understand that are listening to this, but for anybody in my age group, we used to rent videotapes. So I went to the video store and I started renting videotapes, and I caught up on all the history of pro wrestling for like 10 years prior to like when I discovered it. And that's when I found Bret Hart, and it was instantly as a Canadian child that you're like, man, Bret's the be all end all. But yeah, it was originally Stone Cold Steve Austin for me.
Yeah. Have you met Bret?
I have met Bret a few times, not recently in the past few years, since I've had this kind of rise through Impact Wrestling. So hopefully I can meet him again and I can tell him how much he meant to my career. So
it's been quite a thrill. Obviously, when Ken Shamrock got inducted, Bret was one of the inductees along with The Rock. So seeing Bret in some capacity in Impact Wrestling must have been quite a thrill for yourself.
Yeah, and it was really surprising. Like I think both of them were surprising. Like I never thought in a million years that those two would, come in and say something. Not that they don't have the respect for Ken. They've never been around the company. You know what I mean? So you never deemed it to be a possibility, but it was very surprising, very special. And Ken deserved all of it. So.
And you eventually signed with Impact Wrestling. How did that come about? I would imagine Scott D'Amore was a big part of it.
Yeah, Scott was a huge part of it. Everybody in Impact Wrestling, from the crew to the locker room to the management, everyone. Like I have such a good relationship, and I've enjoyed my first 3 years here so much that when it came time for me to maybe explore my other options, I realized I had other options, but I didn't want to leave Impact at all. Like I had no intention of leaving, but I wanted to highlight the fact that there was a possibility, because I've seen so many people leave this company over the last few years. They've used it as a stepping stone to get to a different platform and try to take their careers to a different level. And I want to grow with Impact Wrestling. I think this company's grown so much, since I've been here for the first 3 years, and now signing a multi-year contract. Hopefully we continue to grow. as long as I'm around, and then even when I'm gone, if I'm done wrestling after that, this company continues to grow, because I think we put out some of the best wrestling shows on planet Earth. So it's just where I want to be, and I'm very happy about it.
Who's some of the other people in the locker room that's been impressing you lately? Obviously, you've Impact signed quite a few times this past year alone, and fellow Canadian speedball Mike Bailey's new on the scene as well, joining Impact. Well, he's been on the scene for a while, but joining Impact. Is he really stood out to you? And who else has been standing out to you lately?
Oh, the Mike Bailey thing was funny, because I wrestled him on an independent show maybe a year and a half ago, and Scott D'Amore was in attendance, and I got on the microphone afterwards, and I said, Scott D'Amore signed me in this ring for Impact Wrestling, and he said I was the best unsigned talent in the world. And I was just like, I'm signed to a contract, and I'm looking at the best unsigned talent in the world right now, Mike Bailey. And then a year later, he signs his contract, and I knew the second that he got his visa, the second he got into America and got on TV and stuff, he was going to explode and blow up. And I think that's what everybody's seeing right now. So I think, Mike Bailey would be the one guy that I'm going to say is hot on my trail, try to take my spot, take that world championship from me sooner than later, because he's on a meteoric rise. And it's a testament to how talented he is.
Oh, yeah. And speaking of another Canadian, Ethan Paige, obviously the 2 years with the North, longest reigning Impact Wrestling tag team champions of all time, and hell of a tag team. I'd imagine you worked with him quite a bit on the indie scenes beforehand, but what made that tag team gel so well together? Because, in my opinion, you were the best tag team in any company during that big run you had.
I like, when I look at the history of tag teams that are made like really great and stuff like that, the ones that think you might be great but they didn't end up being great. The one thing that I can think that that I go to when I answer this question that made us special and makes all those other tag teams special is that you understand your role in the tag team. So for us, like, Ethan's a mouthpiece always. He's like the consummate entertainer, and me, like, even though that I've proven now that I can talk and do all this other stuff that I'd never done before, I assume my role of being the professional wrestler of the group, being the one that just handles stuff in the ring and plays my role as kind of the bruiser of the tag team. And I think that's what made us special. We were comfortable in our roles, and we played them properly. And it helped that we were like best friends for 10 years prior to that, because the chemistry was just there right from the get-go.
Yeah. Kind of reminiscing, I know they're idols of yourself, the Steiner brothers. You could say Scott was the mouthpiece, they'll say Ethan, and even though Rick was a good mouthpiece himself, I'm not just because of the headgear, but he was probably the in-ring specialist, I would say, and that kind of related to yourself, I suppose.
Yeah, and like, you can do that with any other great tag team. You have Anvil and Brett, FTR even, Dax is kind of the more mouthpiece guy, even though they can both go in the ring. But Cash is like kind of the guy that just assumes the bruiser mentality of the tag team, and like they've been really successful over it. So it's just finding your roles and being comfortable with it.
Speaking of tag teams, the Briscoes looks like they're on their way in. What's your thoughts on the Briscoes coming?
Could be the most underrated tag team of all time. If we're really being honest about this, if you look at their resume, you look at their record over the past 22 years, they've been a tag team consistently and stuff like that, and just how overlooked they are, because maybe Ring of Honor has not got as much fanfare as it should have had in the past 10 years or whatever. But I'm very happy that they're coming into Impact Wrestling. I think that they can help our tag team division. I think that there's a lot of interesting matchups they can have. And then when they want to split off and go singles, there's a bunch of singles success that those two have had that, there's a lot of matchups that people are going to want to see. So hopefully they're around for more than just, a couple of shots, because I think they're going to be a good part of the locker room.
Oh, yeah, definitely. It's very exciting. Like, obviously, Impact's got a great roster anyway, but I suppose it's building on top of that roster, and bringing in like a few fresh faces just never hurts. And the fact that Briscoes is coming in, I can't help but see great things happening. But during your run with Ethan Page as the North, and I remember it was coming up to Bound for Glory, and a lot of the online fans was, and this was when Eric Young was champion as well, world champ. A lot of fans were speculating, in fact, there was going to be this big, new, and improved Team Canada. Was that something that ever crossed your mind during that time?
Oh yeah, it crossed my mind. I pitched it a few times, and for being honest, there was a moment where it was pitched to us where they were thinking about putting together a new rendition of Team Canada. I think it was me and Paige and Eric Young and I think Taya and maybe
Right.
somebody else was going to be involved. But it was one of those things that was like, we might do this, and then you show up the next taping and it's like, we're not doing any of that. So it was just an idea that was kind of thrown out there, and you get excited for it because the Hart Foundation, Team Canada, all that stuff. Like that's my kind of thing. That's why I have Maple Leafs on my gear. I'm always going to champion where I'm from. But maybe it'll happen in the future. You never say never in wrestling.
Well, if you was to go to creative and pitch a Team Canada, obviously yourself, which 3 or 4 other members would you like to be a part of it?
I think you need people that are going to check boxes for every kind of division, right? So if I'm going to be the heavyweight champion kind of guy, I would be that, and then I would bring in Mike Bailey, would be my first round pick for the X division. I would bring in Taya to be the knockouts division, and I need to find a Canadian tag team. There's a tag team in Montreal called TDT, Tabernacle
Right.
Team, and I don't know if everybody knows who they are, but I think they'd be a valuable part to the locker room as a Canadian tag team. So I wouldn't mind bringing them in and giving them a shot.
Awesome. So after the tag team run, you went back to being a singles wrestler. Would you say you've done great work as tag team wrestler, but do you feel like you're more comfortable being a singles and that's what you prefer?
I definitely prefer it. I wouldn't know about comfortable. Like towards the end of that run with the North, like Ethan and myself, like there was no even forethought going into those matches before we go out there. We just go out, we depend on the chemistry, and it always seemed to go well. We were almost challenging each other to like not be able to do well. We're seeing how far we could push it, but it just kept going well because we had that chemistry. It was just natural to us. And then when I go singles, like the one thing that I always say is that there's so much pressure on you as a professional wrestler, and in a singles match, it's all on you. When I was tagging with Ethan, he'd carry some of the load of and some of the weight of that pressure, and you'd have somebody to depend on here or there. Now it's just all on me, and like whether it's a main event of a pay-per-view or a 60-minute Ironman match, those nerves get going and the pressure, you get backed against the wall, so to speak. And I just think it helps me rise to the occasion because I'm a very competitive guy like that. So I definitely enjoy the singles capacity, even though it is more pressure, but the payoff's that much greater.
It's funny you mentioned the 60-man Ironman. Obviously, this is the first time you've done like a proper interview, but I was on the press pass for your match against TJP, the 60-man Iron match, and obviously you said you Bret Hart fan growing up, so obviously your mind goes automatically to Bret and Shawn WrestleMania 12. But there was a lot of hype going to this match with TJP, and you both delivered. What was your thoughts coming out of the match, thinking, "Wow, I've just done a 60-man"? I don't know if you've done many of them like beforehand, but what was your feelings after you came out from it?
Like I was elated, I was relieved, I was all of the above of all that stuff because I knew the pressure that I put on myself to make sure that match goes down in the history books as one of the best in Impact Wrestling history because I just wanted to be special. I saw it as a jumping off point for my career if I could really do that, and it ended up being that, materializing to that. But if we're being honest, I came back to the back, and it was the first time in my career that the locker room had been waiting to like give you a standing ovation for a match. That's the first time that's ever happened to me, and I just broke down crying because I was physically spent from that match. Like I was like my eyes were swollen shut. I was bleeding from the mouth. Like there was all sorts of like physical pain I endured for that, but like the mental stress of how much pressure I put on myself, and then to have it go so well and have like the locker room, which means the world to me, give me that, giving myself and TJP, sorry, that recognition of what we did. It just broke me, and I broke down crying. I had to call my wife and be like, I don't know what's going on, but it was special.
What was your cheat meal that night to celebrate afterwards?
Oh, there was no cheat meal. We had 2 more days of tapings after that. I hobbled myself back into my hotel room and I laid like 4 bags of ice on 4 different parts of my body and fell asleep. So.
Yep. And obviously great X Division Championship run, and obviously this led to you using Option C and using against Christian. Obviously, another fellow Canadian. I know we were speaking about Canada a lot, but I know you're very passionate about your country. But wrestling Christian in the main event of Bound for Glory, I mean, say that to yourself when you was a teenager growing up watching the Attitude Era. It's a lifelong dream, is it?
Yeah, like I remember I called my friend who like I backyard wrestled with. We were friends, the wrestling kids in high school and stuff like that. And I called him and I was just like, I can't believe I'm wrestling this guy that like he was always one of my favorite wrestlers, but he was my friend's favorite wrestler of all time.
Right.
So it was kind of like that pinch me moment. Like I never would have thought I was going to be a professional wrestler, and now I'm main eventing the biggest show of the year for Impact Wrestling against an absolute legend. So it was completely insane for me.
How was Christian backstage? And obviously, what advice? I mean, was there any like, words of wisdom he gave to you during this time?
Yeah, he was great. Like I think he saw like how much I respected him and how much I looked up to him and how much, I just wanted to do well. And he helped me along with all that stuff and really helped me stand out and show the world that I could talk and go like head to head with him on the microphone and stuff like that, especially the build up for that. And then after the match, the truth of pro wrestlers and what you really think of each other comes out after you're in the ring together. Because you can say whatever you want going into it, but until you go out there and you do it in the ring and you have that chemistry and the respect just grows that much more. And I was very lucky that it went very well. And afterwards, Christian expressed that he had nothing but respect for me and is thankful. And same goes to him. And that now, like, we keep in contact. I have his number, and if I have anything I need help with that I can reach out to anybody, he's one of the first people on my list I go to. So I'm very lucky for that.
Yep. And obviously, you mentioned at the top, obviously Moose cashed in. So from joy, evasion to disappointment afterwards. But obviously, this built up for the past 6 months. Taking out obviously the competitiveness out of it. Like, obviously, you can't imagine the biggest of fans of Moose after what he done to you. What do you think as his reign as champion? Because he's really stepped it up, like physically and mentally. He's on another level to what he was, say, a year ago.
Yeah, Moose is like a weird character because he'll do interviews and he'll say the wrestling doesn't matter and all this other stuff, but on the other token, he'll go out there and he'll try to do everything in his power to stand out and show that he's one of the best athletes and one of the best wrestlers going today. So he contradicts himself left and right and all that stuff, but Moose has had a fine reign. If you take into account the fact that he's avoided giving me my world championship rematch for 6 months. So, he stretched it as long as he could. And I think his time's coming up April 23rd because he knows just like everybody else what's going to happen, especially after everything's done with my family and stuff like that. It's only going to sweeten it for me when I make him tap out.
Cool. Well, Josh, absolute pleasure to speak to you. Can't wait for Rebellion, like you said, April 23rd, the big rematch. Everyone's been waiting for it. So, yeah, but before we go, tell everyone where they can find you on social media to show their support to you, I suppose you could say.
At walking_weapon on Instagram and Twitter for everything pro wrestling on my schedule and anything going on in the world of Josh Alexander. And please just continue to support Impact Wrestling. Watch every Thursday night at 8 o'clock, 8:30 for the YouTube Insiders. Yeah, Rebellion's going to be special on April 23rd.
Cool. Thank you. And yeah, hopefully next time we're speaking, you're the world champion.
Thanks, James.